All right, y'all. Welcome to Blacks with Power, the show for blacks in America who want to discover ways to harness their power in order to protect the gains won by the struggles of our ancestors and advance the cause of freedom for themselves, their family, and for others. We believe that for America to be great, for America to become the beloved community for which Dr. King dreamed and be the more perfect union that our Constitution calls for us to be, then we must have racial reconciliation in this country. And for there to be true reconciliation, blacks in America must empower themselves to compel and encourage repentance for the system and ideology of white supremacy and privilege that has betrayed the ideal of liberty and justice for all. I'm Father Jabril Ballantine, and I will be your guide to harnessing your power and leveraging it in ways to affect the changes that we need to see in order to make Black Lives Matter in this country. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit us online at blackswithpower.com. Please feel free to like our Facebook page, facebook.com/blackswithpower. Join in on the discussion. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, on YouTube, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on TuneIn. Listen to the previous episodes and write a review. Give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Let us know what you like, what you dislike, so that we can continue to fine-tune this show for you. Now, I want to be sure to hear from you, engage you in conversation. To join our private Facebook community, blackswithpower.com/Facebook gets you in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, your concerns, your insights. I have a lot to discuss today, so let's get right to it. In this episode, I want to talk to you about something that's been popping up a lot lately. I don't know how many of you have seen the news about Jeff Sessions, Attorney General Jeff Sessions being on the Hill again. Who knows what he's talking about? I guess we'll find out in a couple weeks if he's lied this time again, or, not recalled, or whatever it is that he calls it. But what came up, I was grateful to see the number of CBC members, Congressional Black Caucus members out there and questioning and grilling him about this document, this FBI report. Looking at it here, you can find it online. I'll probably put a link to it on the website, but it's entitled "Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers." And in this report, it talks about the rise of what they call black identity extremists, which they define in the report as individuals who seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society, and do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. It goes on a longer definition. You can read it for yourself. Click the link on the website and you can look at the report. And the interesting thing about this report, y'all, and several Black Caucus members came out and were talking about it. I'll put some links to those videos and that testimony as well. You can check that on the site, blackswithpower.com, if you're listening on one of those mediums, iTunes and whatnot. But the report was published in August of 2017, right? But if you read the report, the interesting thing is no one has talked about any of these machinations, any of these things going on in the FBI until now, right? And it's interesting that no one had a problem with this stuff until now when President Trump is in office. Because if you look at the report, you'll see that all of this information, all of the information in the report was completed by the 17th of January 2017, which is before the inauguration of President Trump. And or President Trump just coming into office, right? And so clearly this report wasn't just started under President Trump, right? And in the report, it talks about the 14th of November 2014 report, FBI intelligence bulletin, about potential criminal reactions to Missouri grand jury announcement. So they were looking at potential reactions for, black extremists. They didn't call them black identity extremists then, but they were looking at the potential reactions for black extremists if and ultimately when the officer who was charged for killing Mike Brown were to be found not guilty. But then they also go on to mention the 23rd of March 2016 report, FBI bulletin, titled "Black Separatist Extremists Call for Retaliation in Response to Police-Involved Incidents Could Incite Acts of Violence Against Law Enforcement." Damn near the same title. But this time, instead of black identity extremists, black separatist extremists, one could argue that separatists and identity could be established as a synonymous relationship there, because separatists want their own space. Identity have established their own space. One way or another, it's damn near the same thing, right? And so all of this investigating, all this reporting occurred during the Obama administration. But our good Negroes didn't say anything. At least I couldn't find anything. Maybe they did, but it wasn't publicized. Say anything about these reports when Eric Holder was the Attorney General, when Loretta Lynch was the Attorney General, when Barack Obama was the president. It's only an issue now. Now, don't get me wrong. It's problematic, right? If you know your history, if you don't know your history, then take note. Again, check the links on the page, blacksforpower.com. But you'll also see links to COINTELPRO. My former boss in Congress, the Honorable Cynthia Ann McKinney, raised that issue, was one of the pioneers in raising the issue of COINTELPRO from the congressional standpoint, right? Many people had done it before and talked about it, but in terms of bringing it to Congress, doing hearings on it, so on and so forth, Congresswoman McKinney did a lot to bring that to bear. That's how I ended up falling in love with her and working for her and just dreaming about working for her and ultimately being able to work for her and having a beautiful experience, a traumatic education on Washington politics and so on and so forth. But within that, we know that, and no one really wants to go this far. You see Karen Bass, Honorable Representative Karen Bass, talked about COINTELPRO in her testimony, but did not go as far as to say that COINTELPRO was responsible for the assassination of Dr. King. That's an important point to make, that COINTELPRO had their hands in, the FBI had their hands in the assassination of Malcolm X, was ultimately responsible for the assassination of Dr. King, was responsible for discrediting black activists, civil rights activists, so on and so forth, the Native American movement, or as I should say, AIM, the American Indian movement, and other what they call subversive organizations, right? And so this is nothing new, and it is very traumatic, it's very problematic, it is very troubling, right? It is something that we definitely should pay attention to, but it should not be lost on us that this is not a Trump thing, right? This is not something that is coming about simply because Donald Trump is president of the United States right now. This is something that is as American as apple pie. And one of the questions that you'll hear people ask is, why is there talk about black extremists or black identity extremists as they talk about them? And you'll hear Karen Bass ask Jeff Sessions, why not identify any white identity extremists? Why isn't there no such classification as white identity extremists? And Sessions acts like he doesn't even know what that is. And she's like, haven't you heard of the KKK? He's like, oh yeah, I forgot about them. But, so on and so forth. But we know the game, right? We should understand the game by now. But the key point, brothers and sisters, in understanding why when we want to get up in arms, oh my God, I can't believe they're saying black identity extremists, but look at all of this white supremacist stuff going on and no one's saying anything about this. This country was founded on the basis of white supremacy. White identity extremism is not a threat to white supremacy. Black identity extremism, Hispanic identity extremism, gay identity extremism, female identity extremism, Arab identity, Muslim identity extremism, all of that is a threat to American, to white supremacy, to America, right? White identity extremism is not. So there's going to be no real report on white identity extremism because there's no reason to worry about it. That just upholds white supremacy. So, I hear Father Jabril, what do you do, And the interesting thing is, brothers and sisters, if we're going to expect the government to actually do something about rolling back reports and investigations into black people for advocating on behalf of their rights, you got another thing coming. All of us should come to grips with understanding. And this is part of that traumatic education from working with Congresswoman McKinney, right? All of us should come to understand that the minute we decide to work for the rights of the oppressed, you will be under surveillance. You can guarantee that. You will be under surveillance the moment you decide to advocate for the rights of the oppressed. Now, understanding that, Now it's like, okay, what do you do, right? Many of us will decide to flee. Many of us will decide, you know what, I ain't got time for the fight, or maybe I'll show up on the weekend and I'll do a little bit, and then I'll go home and I'll be a good Negro and tend to the plantation, pick that cotton, so on and so forth. Okay, I guess, whatever. We need you too. But at the same time, we understand, what do we do, right? The answer isn't just to act like this stuff is far-fetched, like this is ridiculous to assert that there's quote-unquote black identity extremists. Representative Bass talks about, challenges Jeff Sessions and says that these organizations mentioned in the report no longer exist. Well, to us in the black bourgeoisie, yeah, they no longer exist. To us in the black bourgeoisie, to the Moorish Science Temple, the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party, the whatever you want to call, right? They no longer exist. But if you spend some time in the community, amongst the people, amongst the 90, if you know that these organizations still exist. These organizations are small. These organizations are a shell of what they used to be. These organizations, a lot of time, like I say about the new Black Panther Party, the old Black Panthers would have nothing to do with these fools, because these fools are crazy. Yes, these fools are crazy. The old Black Panthers, yeah, they knew what they was talking about. They knew what they was doing. The new Black Panthers, them fools is crazy. But these organizations do still exist. Just because you don't see them as you go to school, as you go to your nice jobs, as you live in your nice communities, so on and so forth, don't get it twisted. And so, yes, like the FBI report says, as we see incidences of police brutality against unarmed black people, against police brutality against black people for whatever reason, Philando Castile was armed. He was legally armed, but so on and so forth. But police brutality in general, injustice in general, racism in general, attacks on black identity in general as part of the white power structure, so long as we continue to see those go unchecked, there is a very real temptation for going the wrong direction. Case in point, we have a biblical example of this, brothers and sisters. I mean, when we talk about the crucifixion and Jesus is before Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate comes out to the people and he holds up Jesus to the people, and he says, every year you get to choose to release one prisoner. Who do you want to release? Because Pontius Pilate really didn't want to convict Jesus because he was a little scared. But at the same time, he wanted to give it to the people. And what did the people do? Give us Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. They clamored for the violent thug. Barabbas was a freedom fighter. He was a violent thug of a freedom fighter, but he was a freedom fighter. He thought that what he was doing was about freeing his people from Roman oppression. He was just a violent thug, a godless, violent thug. But when the people are looking at, we have this violent thug or we have this religious person, right? And we know, Jesus seems to be a little different, but all these other religious people, these scribes, these Pharisees, these zealots, these Sadducees, so on and so forth, all of these religious people, all they have done year in and year out is sell us out. The bourgeoisie of that time, all they do is they sell us out. They get some crumbs from the Romans and they live well from the Romans, and then they turn and they keep us subdued. They keep us at bay. They keep us oppressed. They help support the Romans in oppressing us. And so, you know what? Give us Barabbas. And you and I, in the black bourgeoisie, in the talented 10th, so to speak, are in that same position. So the question becomes, in wake of everything that we see going on in injustices and racism on the rise and white supremacy on the rise and on the attack and so on and on the offensive and whatnot, how are we providing the people with nonviolent alternatives to violent extremism, right? That becomes the real question. The question ain't about what the government gonna do. We should know by now the government ain't gonna do nothing. Because if the government was to do something, and if the government really wanted to solve the threat of black identity extremists, the government would not be rolling back consent decrees. The government would be pushing down more consent decrees, making sure that more police officers, police agencies, police departments are working with communities to establish rapport, establish trust, change unjust ways of doing business, change unjust laws, reform the criminal justice system, bring some parity between racial diversity and how it's handled and treated in the justice system. But they're not doing that. So you already know that ain't an option for them. That ain't part of the plan. So the question becomes for us who are sitting in the halls of power, for us who do have seats at the table, what are we presenting to those behind us, those without a voice, that presents an option for them, a nonviolent option that is a hell of a lot better than the violent option? Because right now, the choices that we're giving, we, the gatekeepers, we, the power holders in the black community, those blacks with power, the large presentation, this overarching presentation that we're giving is peaceful protest. We want people to have a peaceful protest. And so we want them to just come out and hold some signs and chant, "We shall overcome," and maybe wave some candles and so on and so forth. We want them to bring out a marching band and have a parade like they did for Freddie Gray in Baltimore. We want them to do all sorts of ridiculous stuff in the name of peaceful protest, protest the police by holding hands with the police. And the folk in the street is like, y'all keep selling us out. And so yes, little by little, bit by bit, they start hearing the whispers of those violent extremists. And they're like, you know what? Some of them, little by little, you know what? I might want to try that. Sound crazy, but at least I'll feel good in the meantime. Brothers and sisters, it is for you and I who have risen to a level where we know different tools, different strategies, to use those different strategies. Dr. King was not a nonviolent person because he was weak. Many folk don't know, and you can look it up. Dr. King was a gun owner. Dr. King was a nonviolent person because he understood the strategy. He understood that strategy was better than violent extremism. And so we have to learn how to present the people with something that is at least as effective, at least makes you feel as satisfied that you have done something, and hopefully even more so effective than what the violent extremists are offering. We have to be able to provide something that is quintessentially nonviolent and that disturbs the peace enough to bring about change. Because for damn sure, stuff got to change, right? So when look at this report, right, and see and understand, the report ain't say nothing that is unexpected, of course. The state is going to try to maintain the state. The state is going to survey those who they think are trying to destroy the state. And destroying the state means upset white supremacy. So yes, even you and I, who have no intentions of being violent, who have no desire to be violent, who have every intention of being nonviolent, so long as we commit to the work of upsetting white supremacy, you and I will be under surveillance. You better believe it. But at the end of the day, if you and I are standing in the right, standing with the right, standing with the truth, standing with God, and are guiding others, compelling others to take their stance by standing with that right, with that truth, with our God as well, then even if we die, we are blessed. And ultimately, that is the goal. That is the end, brothers and sisters. Ultimately, that is our purpose. That is our desire. If we are to have beloved community, if we are to be a more perfect union, if we are to walk into the kingdom of God, we must do so now. And so I want to hear from you. I want to know what your thoughts are on how to respond to this report, how to address the reality or the idea, even if you still think it's a myth, of black identity extremists. the dichotomy between how black extremists are received and how white extremists are received. And so we talk about that in the safe space of the group. If you go to blackswithpower.com/Facebook, you can join our group and join in on that discussion. I hope to hear from you. I hope to work this out with you, invite you into that relationship. And be sure to like our Facebook page, facebook.com/blackswithpower, and subscribe to the show on iTunes, on YouTube, on Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn. Again, listen to previous episodes and write a review. Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down. Let me know what you think, because this show is designed for you. Listen to your previous episodes and share it with your family and your friends. A charge to keep we have, brothers and sisters. A God to glorify. A never-dying soul to save and fitted for the sky. We have come a long way. Don't let nobody tell you otherwise. We as a people have accomplished a great deal. But you and I know we ain't there yet. So let us march on till victory is won. Live with power. Peace.